Welcome to Enroute, the podcast of the First Responder Behavioral Health Institute. The First Responder Behavioral Health Institute is bringing together some of the most inspiring and dedicated change agents in the global public safety, psychotherapy, and educational communities. Each episode of Enroute seeks to bring together first responder change agents and clinicians dedicated to constructively disrupting the status quo by tackling the tough subjects like first responder suicide, post-traumatic stress, moral injury, sanctuary trauma, leadership development, critical incident response, peer support teams, and what it means to be psychologically safe and healthy while working in an unsafe world. All units, please stand by. The Enroute podcast is about to begin. You can resume normal traffic on this channel after this transmission.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Bouchard. I'll be the guest host today for the Enroute podcast put on by the First Responder Behavioral Health Institute. Welcome. Very excited. We have a very special guest today, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. Welcome, Lieutenant Colonel Grossman.
Yeah, my pleasure, Mark. And just Dave is fine. It's an honor to be on board with you and the magnificent men and women out there you serve with this podcast.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Dave. The pleasure is all mine. Trust me, I've real honor to meet you. So what I would love to do, obviously you're a man that needs no introduction. I'm sure people know you have many books and you're a legend in the space of lethal force psychology, police, military background. Pretty much anyone who knows anything knows who you are. But what I would like to do, I understand you've been going around in Ukraine. You've been helping them. Good for you for doing that. I really commend you for doing that. And you've been sharing some of your wisdom. At the end of the day, you really helped me with your wisdom. Reading your books helped me tremendously. And I would love to turn the floor over to you to share some of your wisdom with our listeners on what you've been teaching out there in Ukraine and what you think might help others. So I'd love to turn that over to you.
Thanks, Mark. Hey, in May, for a little over a week, I was in Ukraine. My book, On Combat, translated a lot of languages, and it's been the Ukrainian translation won a Book of the Year award in Ukraine. So their military and little help from the U.S. Embassy and my publisher brought me out to Ukraine. And it was 2 or 3 presentations a day, working all across the country, different units, different schools, different forces, organizations. And I had a short window of time, and with the translation, it was even shorter. So I tried to say, what are the bare minimum I would want? Now, Ukraine, they've already lost in 2 years of war more people than U.S. lost in all of Vietnam. They lost far more than we lost in Korea. In ratio to their population, they've lost far more than we lost in World War II. And they're on to this 3rd year of this brutal war. And if it were my son heading back out in that war zone and somebody had just that much time, what would I want somebody to teach him? Now, this book was actually written for my son going to his first combat tour. With the invasion of Afghanistan, my son was there in that first element, that Spec Ops element went in the invasion of Afghanistan. And the first rough draft of this is what I wanted to give my kid. Now, my son just retired now after 27 years, 9 combat tours, 3 Bronze Stars, and my grandson is about to deploy to Kuwait. Smart kid, he went Intel, so he'll stay air-conditioned and comfortable. But so the dynamics is this, given a brief period of time, the single most important wellness issue is sleep. We're in the middle of a global epidemic of sleep deprivation. The video games, the cell phones, the live streaming movies and videos, the social media, these all steal our time. And they're like, when people are in combat, it's like this drug that they're drawn to. It pulls them away from sleep, and we need sleep. And the way people would rationalize it, I'll lay a foundation for you. I trained an American battalion, infantry battalion in Fort Campbell, about to punch out to Iraq about a decade ago. And the battalion had previously been in Iraq, and the sergeant major told me that they had been in a barracks environment during the night and combat patrols during the day. And he told his troops, it's lights out at 9 o'clock the night, lights out 9 o'clock. He said, if I catch you, the sergeant major, I catch you up after 9 o'clock playing video games, I will take your video games. He said, a week later, I had a closet overflowing with video games. He said, these are good kids. They're good troops. They wouldn't disobey an order, but they can't not play those damn games. The addiction is so seductive to somebody in a stressful environment. We recently had a Marine artillery battalion deployed to Syria. And they were on 6 months. They fired a lot of fire missions. They came home and they had just a host of PTSD and suicides and depressions. And oh, it's firing all those fire missions. No. In World War I, in World War II, hundreds of thousands of, no exaggeration, hundreds and hundreds of thousands for years on end fired fire missions. Throughout the World War I and World War II, the artillery, most of them just never stopped firing. And they were fine. The new ingredient was his sleep deprivation that absolutely amplifies everything else. So we had a Ukrainian mid-level commander, I think probably company commander, I couldn't really tell. He said, well, he said, you never when the Russian artillery is going to come. And he can't really sleep. So I play the video games and, to keep myself up. And everybody's mocking him because centuries of research have told us you can sleep through anything. But he was rationalizing this seductive desire to play these games to escape from what he's facing. Another guy in another presentation said, well, I have terrible nightmares. So I watch the movies so I don't have to sleep. And everybody, again, is mocking him and rolling their eyes because it's obvious he's rationalizing the seductive nature of all the things that pull us away. And I ask people, have you ever played the video game and all of a sudden it's 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, got no idea where the last 6 8 hours went, and it's time to get dressed and go to work? Well, they do that on purpose. Vast amounts of research has been done to make these games so immersive that you lose track of time. It's called an alpha state. It's incredibly rewarding. Our body seeks it. Our body desires it. But what they're doing is they're stealing our time and they're killing us. So this global epidemic of sleep deprivation, number one, it is a huge factor in suicide. Now, alcohol has always been a major factor in suicide. Look, you're depressed, you're tired, you got all these problems. But you still have this powerful natural drive to self-preservation. To intentionally take your own life, you have to have profoundly impaired judgment. So you got all these problems, and then you add alcohol, and alcohol is the catalyst that it inhibits this self-preservation and makes the suicide possible. Well, the thing to understand is sleep deprivation is just like alcohol. If you go 24 hours without sleep, it impairs your judgment, just like blowing 0.10 blood alcohol level above legally drunk. So think of sleep deprivation just like being drunk. But if you're drunk, you get better in an hour or two. If you sleep deprived, you just get worse. And sleep deprivation hitting our children, not just adults. So if you think of alcohol as the almost omnipresent catalyst that makes a suicide possible, sleep deprivation is doing the same thing. And one of the best meta study on suicide says not only is sleep deprivation a key factor in suicide, it's the most remediable factor. We can't do much about your relationships right now. We can't do much about your finances right now, but we can get you a good night's sleep right stinking now. And anybody who's been to Ranger School or SEER School will tell you on that second or third day without sleep, you're psychotic. You're hearing voices. You're seeing things and hearing things that are not there on that third day without sleep. And we had people all around us going days without sleep. They race home. They play the video game all night long. The new game came out. They stagger off to school or work. They're a zombie all day. They race home. They play the game all night. Now they're on the third day without sleep. And I will tell you from personal experience, on the third day without sleep, you will hear things and see things that are not there. So do an online search, sleep deprivation, suicide, boom. Sleep deprivation and hallucinations, and boom. This sleep deprivation is destroying our civilization. So here's worldwide, kids are committing suicide. Every demographic group, every nation around the planet, except the Amish, suicides have exploded. Teenagers, 10, 11, 12-year-old teenage girls' suicide rate has tripled per capita in just the last decade. Now, a cop came up, I said, here's parenting 101 for the 21st century. When you send your kid to bed at night, take their cell phone away from them. No laptop in the room, no cell phone in the room. They have got to go to the room and sleep. So a cop came up to me during a break in one of my presentations. He said, I had a good girl. She was an A student. She said, Dad, it's embarrassing. You don't have to take my cell phone every night. You can trust me. Family policy. Cell phone, go to the charger and you go to bed. Okay, I trust you. Keep your cell phone. He said, a little while later, she took her life. He said, my little girl took her life. And we never knew the hell she was living in until we looked at the text messages on her cell phone. Night after night of ceaseless, relentless, vicious bullying. And he can't just ignore that. We're not wired that way. He said it was heartrending to see her all night long, night after night, trying to defend herself, trying to find somebody to stand up for her. He said, I immediately understood my little girl was bullied to death. What I didn't understand was she was sleep deprived, tormented, and bullied to death in front of my eyes. He said, why don't we know this? Why don't we know this? Why don't we know about the link between sleep deprivation and suicide? Why doesn't everybody know that? He said it was heartrending to see my little girl up all night long trying to defend herself. He said the one thing on earth I could have done for my little girl was take her phone away every night and let her turn off all the bad stuff. And that's why don't we know about the link between sleep deprivation and mental illness, sleep deprivation, suicide. And worldwide, traffic deaths have exploded. Decade after decade, we brought traffic deaths down. Airbags, seatbelts, medical technology. Now, worldwide traffic deaths have exploded. What is the new factor? This global epidemic of sleep deprivation. There's a reason why truck drivers and airline pilots and 20 other professions are required by law to get enough sleep. So traffic death, suicide in America is the #1 killer of our cops. We lose more cops to suicide than every other line of duty death put together. And cops have everybody has terrible suicide rate. It's not just cops. Oh, dentists have the highest suicide rate. Doctors, they all have exploded with suicides. They all know their own little silo. Oh, dentists have exploded. Cops have exploded. They don't understand it's global. It's everybody. Suicides have exploded to levels never seen before. And just like alcohol was the catalyst that put you over the top from depressed to suicidal, sleep deprivation, that new component. So there's a great study that I use in my class, and this from a Sleep Research Society and the association with sleep duration and mental health. Now, if you're sleep deprived and the bad stuff comes down, you're already under stress. You're sleep deprived, your body's already under terrible stress. The traumatic event happens, and you're far more likely to get PTSD. So if you're sleep deprived, associated with 5 times greater PTSD, 9 times greater major depressive disorder, and 6 times greater suicidal ideation. Now, this is not a causal relationship. It's not even a correlational relationship. It's a toxic interactive relationship. Suicide, depression, PTSD. You want to do something about it? Sleep. I do classes to schools on school safety. I had all of East Texas School Safety Summit. They're specialists. I said, we're going to talk about murders in your school and stopping that mass murder. But odds are pretty good you haven't had a murder in your school. I'll bet you've had kids commit suicide. I bet you had kids die from traffic accidents. I'll bet you've had kids with drug overdoses. And I'll bet you got a problem with mental illness. What can we do about sleep? What can we do about suicide? Teach them about sleep. What can we do about traffic death? Sleep. What can we do about all those mental illness? Sleep. This is the one component where we can make an immediate, powerful difference. And these industries, they don't want us to know. So a guy wrote a book called Why We Sleep. And in Dr. Walker's book, it's amazing the attacks he's come under, because he talks about the link between sleep deprivation and chronic pain. Why are opiates a drug of choice? Why are people seeking opiates? Why not crack? Why not meth? Well, sleep deprivation creates chronic pain. You ought to know that. You get a bad night's sleep, you wake the next day. Doc, I heard all the time, give me a pill. If you don't need a pill, you need more sleep. And you got to knock off the stinking caffeine that's stopping you from deep cycle sleep. Dr. Walker's book talked about the link between sleep deprivation and Alzheimer's. That just scared the daylights out of all of us. Oh, I'll sleep when I'm dead. You have a decade of Alzheimer's first, you idiot. So these are the things that ought to truly get our attention. And again, the Ukrainians in this terrible war, and they're trying to escape. And these games are destroying them. A Marine artillery battalion, what's the new component? And this is destroying them. So if we gave a damn about police suicide, if we gave a damn, we'd be teaching. My second grade teacher told us cigarettes kill people. I went home and hid my dad's cigarettes. Now, if we teach those kids they need to sleep in total darkness and they need X amount of sleep a day, they'll do it. And we just got to teach this. And the link between the opiate overdoses. In America, we lose 70 to 80,000 people a year from fentanyl. Fentanyl's an opiate. Why are they seeking opiates? So just fentanyl alone, and the prescription opiates have always been there. Why are they seeking that? And it comes back to this sleep deprivation, the chronic pain, and the industries who are stealing our sleep. The head of Netflix said their competitor was sleep. Netflix policy is to steal your sleep. They don't care that it's killing people. They don't care that it explodes the probability of suicide. It explodes the probability of traffic deaths. It explodes the probability of drug overdoses. They don't care that it's a factor in obesity and heart disease. They don't care that it's a factor in Alzheimer's. They just want to sell their product, and they don't care if they're killing people. And they flat said their competitor is sleep. So we need an information campaign to let people know what the threat is to their children and what they can do about it. And it's also tragic. And so for cops, sleep hygiene, number one, you need at least 7 hours of sleep a night. If you're getting less than that, you've got to improve it. We cannot teach our body to get by on less air or food or water. Now, sleep is a biological blind spot. Our body doesn't know how to make us get enough sleep. Our body's good at getting air, food, water. Try going off that air or food or water for a while. Your body will take over. But our body doesn't know how to make us go to sleep because it always happened naturally. Throughout history, untold thousands of years, every night it got dark. There was nothing to do. A little sex, a little talking, you went to sleep. And the body didn't have to make us go to sleep. It happened naturally. Now we have electric lighting and video games and television, all these things that steal our sleep. And the body, there's nothing tough, there's nothing macho about going without sleep. Any 10-year-old girl in a slumber party can do it. The professional thing is to manage your sleep. So minimum 7 hours. And it's so useful to get one of the fitness trackers. The Aura, the Ring is doing real well. The U.S. Air Force is buying these rings by the thousands and giving them to their pilots and tracking their pilots' sleep. We've always mandated sleep time for pilots, but we never tracked it. And now they're tracking it. You're flying a $250 million aircraft tomorrow. Get some sleep. And they're finding out, yeah, we're mandating sleep time, but the pilots are playing games and doing social media. They're not sleeping, and we got to make them sleep. So the Aura, the Fitbit does a pretty good job. And if I were king and I could pass one law, I would mandate sleep for all first responders. Oh, then we wouldn't have enough. Now stop and think. Somebody shows up work drunk. Going to put him on the job? I don't care if he's drunk. We need cops on the job. No, you wouldn't do that. If somebody shows up to work sleep deprived, it's just like being drunk. Now, if somebody showed up to work drunk, you'd kick his ass. And he deserves it. Somebody shows up to work sleep deprived because he played freaking games all night. He needs his tail kicked. There's nothing cute. There's nothing funny about showing up to work drunk. And there's nothing cute. There's nothing funny about showing up to work sleep deprived. Because you play games or social media. You got a sick baby at home. Stayed up all night with a sick baby. Man, we got you covered. You stayed up playing stinking games, downloading movies all day. This is not acceptable. But we got to understand, better no cop than a drunk cop. And better no cop than a sleep deprived cop. Bad things happen, no cop's there. Happens all the time. Bad things happen and a cop's there and does something stupid. We pay a terrible, terrible price for it. You would not put a drunk cop on the street. Do not put a sleep-deprived crop on the street. It is the most on the street, and they got to get that sleep. Now, we X amount of sleep, and it has to be in total darkness. Our body's designed to sleep in total darkness. I'm a huge science geek. Major study in the sleep lab. Totally dark room. Bathroom lights on. The door shut. The light coming out of the crack of the bathroom door is enough light to stop your body from producing the melatonin that you need. Now, then in the fire service, I do a lot of work with them. They're spray painted the windows black from the inside, creating totally dark rooms. But my wife frowns on spray painting the windows black. So plan B is a sleep mask. This particular mask, last time I checked, it's Amazon's first choice. It's got over 85,000 5-star reviews on Amazon. 85,000 5-star reviews for a stinking mask. I can find no book that has that kind of level of review. I can find nothing else that has that level of reviews for a mask. But in the military, we're passing them out by the fistfuls, but they're cheap little things. Spend $25 and get a good one. My grandson goes off to college. What are the 3 things most likely to kill my grandson? Suicide, traffic death, and drug overdoses. What's the greatest gift I've given my grandson? A good night's sleep. He's seen my class. He's heard my stuff. I sent him off to college with 3 different sleep masks. I said, find the one you like and use it. Call him up in college. Hey, buddy, how's college going? Going great, Grandpa. Are you getting enough sleep? Critical question. Are you getting enough sleep? Yes, sir. Are you in your sleep mask? Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, it got kind of grody. I went online, ordered another one. All right, so sleep. 3 things. Total darkness. Seek at least 7 hours sleep and cut off caffeine shortly after lunch. In addition to a global epidemic of sleep deprivation, we're in the middle of a global epidemic of caffeine abuse. Now, caffeine stops you from deep cycle sleep. Caffeine doesn't bother my sleep. Caffeine doesn't make you not sleep. It makes it easier to stay awake and harder to have quality sleep. So you're not getting deep cycle sleep, and that causes Alzheimer's, and that causes chronic pain. That caffeine, it has a half-life in your body of about 5 hours. So the caffeine you took at 5 p.m. is still at half strength when you go to bed at 10 p.m. Guard your sleep, protect your sleep. Sleep is that little vacation that waits at the end of every day, and caffeine is in me a good sleep. So quick and dirty, 3 things. First, understand the magnitude of the threat. We've got Marines in combat, and we've got Ukrainians in 2 years of terrible war who are escaping to these things because they're so addictive and they're so stinking harmful. We've got to prevent that. So 3 things you can do. Number 1, 7 hours minimum amount of sleep. Number 2, sleep in total darkness. Number 3, cut off caffeine shortly after lunch. Those are the 3 biggies. Walk out that door and make a change right now and take charge of your life and take charge of your sleep. So quick and dirty. Now, the other thing in Ukraine, we can talk about in a minute. It's another whole angle that we can cover pretty quickly. But that's the heart and soul of what I wish everybody in America knew. We need a public service announcement. We need everybody to know it's killing our kids. It's killing our teens. It's killing our cops. It's killing our soldiers. And there's something we can do about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'd love to touch on that sleep one real quick before you go on.
Yeah.
You mentioned the book, Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep.
Yeah.
If anyone out there is listening and you have not read that book, it's a fantastic book. And I will say, I was someone who suffered from a lot of trauma and nightmares, specifically from my experiences as a cop. And learning about sleep hygiene was part of how I think it helped me to down-regulate my nervous system, change some of my habits. You've given people a ton of great advice, okay? Light will impact your sleep. The sleep mask, the blackout blinds, all those kind of things. I'll add one more, temperature, okay? Yeah. Understand you're meant to sleep in a cold room, so you want to turn the temperature down a little bit, and you can even do it by activating your own temperature. So I went and bought a sauna that then when you warm up, it forces you to cool yourself down. It basically activates your parasympathetic nervous system. That will help you. Next, another thing I found that helped me, I just found it anecdotally by accident, is watching the sunset. Like that involvement with nature and watching the lights, the kind of lights from the sunset will help to calm your nervous system. Plus, it's by shifting your gaze instead of this intense focus gaze, you're having more of like a relaxed panoramic type gaze. That will also help you. And these were things I kind of found by accident, but then as I started learning the science behind it, it really helped me. And I will say, I heard you on another podcast years ago speak about sleep science. And you inspired me to write a chapter all about sleep science in my book, because the book, it's what I needed. And no one teaches us. No one was teaching us back then, but it's up to us in the profession to change our culture.
Yes.
And we need to normalize sleep, because there's things we can do, even like changing our schedules. This 2 days, 2 nights, it's not working.
Yes,
Okay, let's find better schedules that are more in line with our or with our body, because we are meant to be, like diurnal, like we're not nocturnal essentially. And when we try and shift every, 12 hours every 2 days, we're making it worse. And there are schedules out there. There are alternatives. We have to believe we can do it. And the other one I want to add is naps. There's another good resource. Nick Littlehales has another book where he talks about the number of sleep cycles you need, which is basically what you're saying. You're pretty much saying you should be getting 5 a night and you want to at least be getting 4. And he essentially argues that you could use naps and you could do either 30-minute or 90-minute cycles, which will count for a sleep cycle. But we need to normalize that we can do this on duty, right? I don't know why. I worked for an agency and we would pay firefighters to go sleep 7 hours a night. And if you had a 5-minute nap as a cop, we're going to write you up. And honestly, we can change that culture and we need to. So I love that you're giving people actionable insights. And I think it's a part of changing our culture. So I want to really commend you and thank you for your leadership on that.
Thank you. Thank you. And funny, so many things, just dynamite. I gave the short version. The only thing I'd never heard of was watching the sun. That's so good. Like you said, we pay firefighters to fight. Only firefighters and prostitutes make money in bed. All you fire guys, we're teasing. We're just jealous. But this idea, NYPD has got all kinds of problems, and I've done a lot of work with them, and they're just coming unglued. They got so many problems, but a lot of them moved to the Postal Service, and I was training the Postal Service. They were in New York, and they see, the one thing that NYPD did right was let us take naps. They said, these guys, if they catch us asleep, we're out of a job. NYPD had a dark, quiet place in every precinct where you could crash. And they knew, I'm on night shift. I come into court all day long. I needed time to crash, and we allowed that. And so there's things that can be learned about napping, and 30 minutes a minimum nap. And one of the things I teach is 30 minutes minimum nap. Obviously, there's more to that whole dynamic. But we've covered that subject pretty well. If you want to walk out that door and take charge of your life, then number one, make it as dark as you can. Seek at least 7 hours of sleep. Cut off caffeine shortly after lunch. And, I always tell people say, well, this mask makes me sweaty. Well, good. Turn the temperature down. It's supposed to be cool. When you wear that mask, and turn the ceiling fan on, turn the temperature down until this mask is comfortable. And now you're in the sweet spot. You're supposed to be dark and cold and cool. So you really hit it. And there's so much that we've got to learn about that. It's killing our children by the thousands. It's killing the number one cause of death of our cops. It's number one cause of death of every profession everywhere. It's exploded. Why don't we have public service announcements about getting enough sleep? The video game will never tell you. You've been playing the game for 24 hours, go to sleep now. The social media never say you've been online for 36 hours, get to sleep. They'll never do that. And so we've got to make it happen. We're fighting that entire industry. Dr. Walker received incredible attacks from all these various industry paid stooges on what he's putting out there. And so he's got an online website. You don't even have to read his book. Go to the website. And he's got all the latest research since his book came out, just reaffirming. He's a scientist. You attack him, he just throws more research at you. Attack him, he throws more research at you. And these industries, they don't want you to turn off the video game. They're making money. So I tell people, my dad started smoking in 1941 when he was 5 years old. He plunked a nickel on the counter of the general store. He said, couldn't look over the counter. Plunked a nickel on the counter, bought a pack of bull-run tobacco and rolling paper, started smoking 5 years old. Hey, candy rot your teeth, right? Candy rot your teeth. But here's what they believe. Here's what they said. The Viceroy said, as your dentist, I would recommend Viceroy cigarette. Dentist say Viceroys, huh? Wow.
That's sad.
Or doctors smoke Camels in the cigarette. Oh, docs smoke Camels. Dentists smoke Viceroys. But they're poison. They're all poison. Don't do it. And 55 years later, those cigarettes finally killed my dad. But that industry didn't care that they were killing people. They just wanted to sell their product to children. And here's where everybody should draw the line. When it comes to children, we can do something about it. One of the books I recommend is my book, Assassination Generation, talks a little more about that. But let's roll into the second major topic if we can.
Yeah, go for it.
What's really going to happen in combat? What's going to be like in combat? 85% have diminished sound effect. The shots get muted. Now, I wrote the book on hunting, and hunting is the only other place where you dip into that same physiological responses as combat. And I say, how many of y'all are hunters? Now, raise a hand. How many of y'all ever notice something? You fire your hunting rifle one time at the range without hearing protection, your ears ring for the rest of the day. You go to shoot a deer, boom, people a mile away here. What do you hear? Nothing. God, I see you nodding your head. Raise your hand. Yeah. Did you talk to anybody else? No. We stayed, nobody ever said the shots get muted. How in the world could we have had 500 years of gunpowder combat and not let people know what every hunter knows that shots get muted? So this is an area of huge progress in our understanding of humanity and what's happening in combat. The shots get muted. And sometimes if you got by surprise, boom, 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 shots overwhelm me, start shooting back, the shots get muted. The body is focusing intensely on the sense it needs most for survival. When you start shooting back, the eyes dial in, the ears dial out, and the shots get muted. Tunnel vision, 80% were conscious of tunnel vision, but the actual number is probably more like 100%. When we do our force-on-force engagements, if you're not videotaping it, you're losing the majority of the learning. And you watch the video of it, oh, that was right in front of me, I never saw it. That was tunnel vision, and you didn't even know it. So bad guys have tunnel vision too. And lateral movement takes you right off their radar screen. Rapid lateral movement, a rapid sidestep and draw. Lateral movement takes you right off their radar screen. At best, at least you're a moving target. At best, you come right off their radar screen. Bad guys have tunnel vision through autopilot. You do not rise to the challenge. You sink to the level of your training. And then slow motion time. I've had hundreds of people tell me they can see the bullet in combat. It absolutely blows people's mind. I had a U.S. Marshal. I was training. I was at Long Island a couple of years back, and I had NYPD regional cops and a Marshals team recently been in a horrendous gunfight. And one of the Marshals came up to me afterward, and she said, I want to tell you about slow motion time. So I'm going down this corridor, limited lateral movement in a warehouse. This guy comes around the corner and shoots at me. I lit back and shot. She said, I watched the bullet go past and clip my hair. It's not like the Matrix where it crawls past, but we've all done airsoft or paintball, get tractor darts, and that's what it's like. And it blows people's mind, and we need to know. Memory loss. Half of all trained seasoned cops have blackouts. After a couple of nights sleep, comes back, and some never comes back, and that's okay. I always encourage for spouses and mature teens to come to my class. You could have a kid who's a high school senior be in the combat zone a year from now. And spouses need this as much as anybody. So a cop and his wife came up. And the wife said, while my husband was on duty, a man came home to murder his family. Now, not only we have record number of cops murdered in the line of duty, record number of cops shot in the line of duty. We got bad guys coming to the house to murder the family. But Mama Bear, protecting her cubs, most dangerous thing on the planet. Cop's wife said, I killed this guy, never lost a second of sleep over killing this guy to protect my children. And I believe that. We'd want it to be that way. There's nothing wrong with that. She said, you know what really bothered me? I heard my voice on the audio recording of my 911 call. And to this day, I have no memory in making that call. She said, it was really bugging me. And then somebody showed me a book. Said, look, page 55. It's in the book. It's normal. And boom, she was fine. You can't just tell people, oh, that's normal. Got to show it to them in the book. That's how we're wired. Psychologists call that normalizing. That's too trivial a term for something so important. But wouldn't it have been better to know ahead of time? We want to be vaccine and not antibiotics. Wouldn't it have better to know all this ahead of time? So half of all cops have memory gaps, blackouts, and 1 out of 5, 22% have memory distortions. They just flat remember something that did not happen. And I think it's useful to look at 2 examples of this, because they're almost always something terrible. They almost always misremember something terrible. We had a cop that came up to me, Indiana, a couple of years back, young black officer, super squared away young man. He said, you're right, things are out of control. He said, I've been in 3 deadly force incidents in the last 2 years. He said, the last one, The guy pulled a knife on me and his arms reach away. Now, you start a knife fight, arms reach away, you're going to get cut. He basically said, I'm going to get cut. I'm going to keep fighting. He drew and fired, hit the spinal cord. Bad guy dropped like a bag of rocks. You know, in Hollywood, you shoot them and they fly away. It doesn't work like that. You know, you shoot them one time, they always fall down. It doesn't work like that. Hit that spinal cord, different story. Boom. The cop was never touched. But he said, I saw blood on my hands. I had this vivid image of blood on my hands. So the peer support guy comes to pick me up. Peer support, great program. We'll go to the hospital. Always go to the hospital. Then a while back, I was in Utah. Cop told me that that there was a traffic was stopped. A bunch of cops at a crime scene, and a guy pulls out of traffic and starts charging. He's going to mow down all these cops. That's his plan. It was a vehicle's weapon of mass murder. The cop shot through the windshield, sidestep, bad guy down. Happy end of the story. He said, I went to bed that night, took my pants off, and the entire left side of my leg was black and blue. He'd been hit by a car and didn't know it. So always go to the hospital. So on the way to the hospital, the peer support guy, my buddy says, dude, for the last time, there is no blood on your hands. Stop asking. That's how powerful those memory distortions can be. I'll give you another one. A police chief recently told me, we've got a police officer talking down a suicidal kid. He knows the kid. He's talking him down. He's got his gun up. Kid's got his gun under his chin. Finally, the kid says, okay, I won't do it. Drops his gun, cop puts his gun, kid picks up the gun, kills himself. Cop said, I had an accidental discharge. I shot him. No, you didn't. Your weapon was never fired. The entry wound was here. No, I had an accident. I shot him. No, you didn't. And your weapon was never fired. Here's his ejected brass. Here's the entry wound. The chief said he went to the grand jury and we had to coach him on what to say. Now, this is the truth. And he went to the grand jury. He said the right thing. He walked out and he said, Chief, are you sure I didn't shoot him? That's how powerful a memory can become. Now, here's the critical point. We've got to get together afterwards and do the debriefing. And we got to fill in the memory gaps and sort out the memory distortions. We hold each of those lives in our hand during the incident, and we hold those lives in our hands after the incident. And we do that debriefing. The critical incident debriefing is absolutely essential. I'm doing some work with Israel, a lot of work in Ukraine, little in Israel. You think Israel would be the masters of combat psychology. They're way behind. They got people, oh, these debriefings could just re-traumatize the individual. No, in 20 years of war, in incredibly violent times in law enforcement, we have learned that debriefing is absolutely essential. But everybody has a bottle of water in front of them. And when they begin to re-experience the event, they stop, take a big swig of water. From the very beginning, separate the memory from the emotions. Now, there's two things happening here. When you talk about it, there's a very good chance you will begin to re-experience it. Your heartbeat go up, sympathetic nervous system goes up. Re-experiencing the event is not PTSD. It's normal. How you deal with it will decide whether or not it becomes PTSD. I'll give you an example now. Arkansas State Trooper, first gunfight. Bad guy's down, he's alive, happy ending to the story. He said, week after my first gunfight, I'm sitting in the bleachers with my wife, watching our daughter at a swim meet. He said, like a starter's gun went off. I didn't expect it. Boom, heart pounded, gasping for air, drenched with sweat. His wife thought he's having a heart attack. He didn't know what was happening, but it's a panic attack and it's normal. It is not PTSD. You will literally drive yourself crazy trying to not think about it. What if this guy had said, I can never go to swim meet again. I hate 4th of July. I can't go to the range anymore. I can't go hunting. I hate loud noises. You will literally drive yourself crazy trying to not think about it. You got to make peace with the memory. Got to separate the memory from the emotions. And that debriefing is the first part of the healing process. You talk about the incident, you begin to re-experience it. A powerful way to pull you from sympathetic to parasympathetic is a big swig of water. Now, if that doesn't work, the doc's got a lot of other tricks that he can use, but we begin with that debriefing, fill in the memory gaps, sort out the memory distortions, and most important of all, re-experiencing the event is not PTSD, it's normal. How you deal with it will decide whether or not it becomes PTSD. So given like 45 minutes to an hour in Ukraine to cram in the nuts and bolts, the sleep, and this whole dynamic of what it's really like in combat. And these guys, I'm telling you, all of them have been seeing years of intense combat. They were just eating this stuff up. It was so rewarding. It nodding their head and yes, 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 yes. And finally, somebody's talking about it. This is what happened. Why have we never gotten this info out? I'm so proud of you with your book and getting the info out, and just disseminate this to the people that are out there. So many other nuts and bolts we get hit, but that's the critical dynamics right there. And from that point on, I appreciate your patience with me. We're kind of hand it over to you, and questions or thoughts you might have on the matter.
Oh, there's no patience. That was exactly what I wanted, is you sharing your wisdom. Because through reading your book, I learned some of that. And I learned that I could heal. Like, and I went from feeling like a victim to my diagnosis with PTSD to an active participant in my own recovery. And then it was, oh, go ahead.
How good we are treating PTSD. We're really good at treating PTSD.
We're only good if we'll let ourselves accept the help.
Yes.
Because that's where the stigma comes in. So the title of my book is Setting My Sights on Stigma, Thoughts from an Injured Mind.
Yes.
I actually share about 40 pages of my journaling to one of my brothers. I spent about 10 years on what would be, it's called an emergency response team in Canada, but it's the equivalent of like a SWAT team in the US. That's what it is. And just sharing like my own hardship when I failed my return to work psych exam. Like, I lived with nightmares every night, and I suffered from a lot of that trauma, and I felt like a victim to it. But as I learned the little bits of what I could do, so what you've described of the sleep and what you've described, to me, it's the sip of water. It's the little wisdoms of an action that you can take that we give you. Here's how. We don't need to tell you we're activating your parasympathetic nervous system. It's like, do I need to teach you to armor a gun, or do I need to teach you to shoot a gun? Because those are very different things. And you know the details of like the armoring the gun of the mind, but you know how to give us the little bits of wisdom that I can remember to take a sip of water. And that's some deep wisdom that's very simple. Much like when you talked about the sleep science aspects, like that's the thing we can control both internally as individuals, but within the culture, within the organization.
Yes.
Where I would love to see us get is that we teach all these things to you ahead of time. Because right now what we do, like for example, in my organization, we have a reintegration program, which is a great thing. And they issue your book on combat along with Dr. Gil Martin's Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement, which are fantastic books. But I would argue that not everyone reads them when they get given them. So it's still really good to give them. But where I want to see us get to is that you not only get those books at the beginning of your career, but that we actually take some of the key concepts and we teach it to you in the course curriculum. Because I think we're teaching a lot of things, that how to march better and how to polish your boots and all this stuff that like no one ever died because their boots weren't polished enough. I'm not saying it's not important. Let's put time into those things. But when we know mental health is, like you said, suicide is the #1 killer, how much are we really investing in mental health proactively ahead of time? You know, and you've talked about the impacts of sleep on suicide. In Police Suicide Epidemic in Blue, John Violante says that essentially the higher your rate of night shifts, the higher your risk of suicide. So what can we do to start shifting that? And I guess what I would love to ask you, if you had that ability to put some things into a police curriculum, like specifically for police, and obviously police do have, you know, lethal force encounters, what would be like a key concept or some of the key concepts that you would want to teach to cops?
Well, I just gave you the best I've got. Given the window, just gave you the best I got. We talked about the nuggets on sleep. We talked about letting people know what's going to happen in combat. You know, the memory gaps and memory distortions. By the way, when we talk about memory gaps and memory distortions, in Texas, it's the law. Everywhere else, it's common sense. The cop should have the right to see every video before they make their formal written statement. Now, our goal, the Pledge of Allegiance, last 3 words of Pledge of Allegiance: justice for all, justice for all. That's our goal. Now you got tunnel vision, things right in front of you didn't see. You got memory gaps, you got memory distortions. You put that on paper, gonna kick your tail in court. You know what? Oh, you're right in front of you. You lied. You didn't talk about it. You said this happened. It didn't happen. So the world is going to watch that video over and over again in slow motion time and play Monday morning quarterback. And the person in the incident should have every right and reason to be able to to watch that video and fill in the memory gaps and sort out the memory distortions. Number one, for their personal healing, and number two, to provide justice, to put the truth in that video and put the truth in that written statement. So letting people know about this stuff. One thing you mentioned that I used to cover is that the single worst thing we could possibly do is rotating shifts. The research is overwhelming on that. Every time you rotate shifts, you're giving everybody jet lag. Rotating shifts takes years off people's lives. It destroys families. Families that can handle day shift, families can handle night shift. They can't handle rotating. That data is overwhelming. Most of the research in that field is from the medical community. And just do an online search for shift work. And that's the term almost always used in that community for rotating shifts. And see the incredible harm that's being done. There's nothing you can do that will destroy the ability of all your people and give them all jet lag, take years off their life, destroy their family. I don't know why, the new guy says, well, I don't want to wait to be on day shift. This is no fair. Let's rotate his shifts. Well, suck it up, Buttercup, because rotating shifts is the single most harmful thing. Don't cop a pity party out there. But when you're in charge, get it fixed. And the 12-hour shifts, the data's there, the 12s are hard. California Highway Patrol, 7,000 people moved to 12-hour shifts. They dropped it a year later like a hot rock. Accidents exploded, internal affairs investigations, complaints exploded at the end of 12-hour shifts. You're not getting 12 hours work. And when they had any kind of commute time, you got terrible sleep deprivation woven into that. But worse than 12, far worse, is rotating shifts. It's medically negligent. We can no longer keep doing that. The research is overwhelming. There's nothing we can do that could do so much harm. Don't cop a pity party, but try to get it changed.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think the answer should be, what can we do to change it? You obviously referenced earlier that if someone with 24 hours without sleeping is essentially legally drunk.
Yeah.
And there are the times when it's, someone's choosing to play video games, or there's that side, but there's also can't sleep because of trauma. Like, I've had friends where they show up to work and I just go like, dude, what happened? Like, I love you, but you look terrible. And it's like, I didn't sleep at all last night, and it's from the trauma. But then there's also the call volume, like just operational tempo. And I'll say, I had one call where it was a suicidal call, and a woman came out of a house with a gun in her mouth. And I had to make a lethal force decision whether to shoot or not shoot. And I'd had about 2 hours sleep in about 2 days. And 30 minutes of that was in the vehicle on scene. And this was at about 10:30 in the morning. And I took my gun off safe and I was going to shoot, just action reaction. And ultimately she went back in the house. I didn't have to shoot, and I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of situation that cops are being placed into. And this is why, like, within the system, we need to do everything we can to mitigate the challenges.
Recruiting is down, retention is down. So we've got this mindset where Chicago PD is working 7-hour days month after month. Working 7-hour weeks month after month. And somehow that's going to make it better. Wearing out your cops is not going to make it better. Putting tired people on the street is going to make it worse. And we got to understand that. Better no cop than a tired cop. We get an airplane, better no pilot than a tired pilot. We're all in agreement on that. Better no cop than a tired cop. We cannot keep doing business this way. And it comes down to education process and a new generation. But at the same time, we have the anti-cop woke attack, which is worthy of spending a few minutes on as well. This attack on law enforcement is unlike anything we've ever seen before. And something to understand about that, it's important, is that what you're looking at is this Marxist mindset that the world divides into the oppressor and the oppressed. And they have decided that the criminal is the oppressed and the cops are the oppressors. Now, you got to understand that. You got to recognize what's happened here. This is the framework. The cops are the bad guys and the criminals are the good guys. And the price we pay for that is horrendous. So we've got what we call the Ferguson effect. After the Ferguson incident, a law enforcement officer killed an individual. If that had been on video, it wouldn't have been an incident. But we had riots across America, and the next 2 years, homicides were up 12, 13%. And again, boom, boom, 2 years straight, homicides exploded. From this sick narrative that the cops are the bad guys, the criminals are good guys, and I stayed there. But then in 2020, In 2020, we had an explosion of homicides, orders of magnitude worse than we've ever seen. We've never seen more than a 12, 13% annual increase in homicide. And then in 2020, it's up 30%. It's just mind-boggling. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. And it was the George Floyd effect. It was this twisted story that the cops are the bad guys, criminals are good. And no civilization can survive if we teach our children and teach our citizens that the law is bad and crime is good. And that's what's happening. And it eats away the very fabric of our civilization. And we have to stand up and confront that. And really, it goes back to the media, the video games and the movies. And right up until the early 1960s, Hollywood TV movies operated by a code. And a lot of the code could be said in 3 words: crime doesn't pay. Law enforcement must not be depicted in a negative manner. And criminals must not be depicted in a positive manner. Then the early 1960s, they threw that code away. It's just gotten worse and worse. And maybe one of the most, and thing to understand is when you're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, what's in your dreams, what's in real life, what's on TV are all mixed up. As an adult, you ever get dreams and real life mixed up? You know, my son, he's pushing 50. Asked my wife, he said, "Tell you that? Did I just dream it?" Oh, you must have dreamed it. You ever been there? But what kids' dreams in real life and movies are, they're all real. And so they see cops doing evil things, and it really happened. And maybe one of the most evil movies ever done, Denzel Washington, beloved black actor in Training Day, plays a corrupt, violent cop. Denzel's a bad cop. They're all bad. So think about defund the police. What sane, rational creature would think, empty all the prisons? That's our agenda. Everybody in prison is oppressed. Empty all the prisons, get rid of all the cops, it will be better. Well, what would it really be like? Well, a lot of us saw the movie The Purge, where they turned off the murder law for one day. The Purge didn't empty all the prisons. The Purge didn't turn off all laws. The Purge was just for one day. We'd never put the pieces back together again. One day without justice, empty the prison, turn off all the laws. One day without justice, we'd never put the pieces back together again. So we've got to understand what's going on out there and this constant attack. But what it means is that we got to win the game by the rules, and it's a nationally televised game. Everything you do will be caught on camera. And if we send a sleeper-deprived cop out there and he does something stupid, we pay a terrible price for it. But we've got to confront this narrative that crime is evil and criminals are good. And they believe that because they watched Denzel Washington. They know cops are evil. They've seen it happen. Denzel's a bad cop. They're all bad cops. We could not have done a better job of brainwashing a whole part of our civilization. The cops are all corrupt, violent, evil individuals, murdering innocent people and getting away with it every day. This sick narrative is so destructive. Recruiting is down, retention is down, crime has exploded, and the new factor in the equation is the media. Communicating many, many sick messages in the video games and the movies and then in the news that the cops are evil, killing innocent people, and the prisons are full of innocent people. And it is so destructive, and we got to confront it every step of the way.
Yeah, I'm with you. And before I jump into that, I just want to highlight, I should have said this earlier, but if anyone has questions, throw them into the chat because I would like to jump into some. So I would love put a queue at the front and I would love to jump into those. But I'm going to elaborate a little bit on what you just said there, Dave, because it's so important. One of my best friends, his name's Jordan McWilliams. He was on the emergency response team with me, and he went to a hostage rescue call, and the hostage taker pointed the gun at the police. It's all on video. There's no dispute of what happened. He still got charged with murder for shooting that man. He shot that man one time in the body, and the suspect died. And like literally, he shot his working gun multiple times. It's on video. But they ruled that the suspect had pointed the gun from straight up to straight down and had unconsciously done it without pointing it, without intent. And it's just we're setting very unrealistic expectations on cops that are not true with reality, right? And I think it ultimately comes down to an understanding of violence in society. So in my book, I describe something as the experience effect. And I would say it's essentially what Kevin Gilmartin does with his scout leader example. Yeah. Our experiences shape our perception. And when for cops, it can be of somewhat that cynical perspective because every scout leader we deal with is a pedophile, right? And I don't mean to disparage scout leaders, but we're left with that perception. And I use my dad as the example for the experience effect. He's a 77-year-old accountant. And in his world, logic solves everything. Violence is never the answer. And if it doesn't work, then I sue someone. That's the end of the equation. But and I love him, but it's because he's never gone to a situation where someone has a gun, they're holding a hostage. And it's hard for us in society to wrap our head around, if we haven't experienced those things, that reality. And I think we can attribute to cops like, oh, the police used force. Oh, they failed to de-escalate. And let me tell you about another situation. Another friend of mine went to a call where someone had murdered multiple people and then was on their way to murder another one, right? They issued a warning on everyone's cell phones. And thankfully, it was actually a police officer that ran into that person first. And there was a lethal force encounter, and the suspect died, and the officer thankfully survived. But that's not a failed de-escalation. That's a hero who almost died, who risked their life, and who thankfully saved unknown numbers of society. And we don't track, the number of lives saved. We don't truly track the number of people they already killed, but we do track, oh, that many of, suspects were shot or whatnot.
Yeah.
And I don't think it truly captures one key aspect, which is what I really got from your book on killing, which is how badly police don't want to use force. Because I didn't understand that until my first suicide by cop attempt. And someone pointed an imitation firearm at me, and I didn't end up shooting. I would describe it as my amygdala screamed shoot and scream move in the exact same instant. And I wasn't even ready for it. And it's part of why I suffered a lot of trauma and a lot of nightmares about it. And honestly, a lot of shame and guilt, which I didn't understand. And I've now talked to so many anecdotal examples of officers where they tell me about similar situations where I would say they would be justified to use lethal force. And in my book, I describe it as a gray zone of like the range of you're definitely not justified versus like you'd be criminally negligent not to. And it is this massive zone where officers could, and they so badly don't want to.
Yes.
And it really can often bring us a great deal of pain when we're forced to, and we do it out of our want to help and save society. And I've actually heard you describe it as love. It's hard for people outside of it to understand, but it's the love of your society, of your community, of your brethren, of your kids, that you would do anything for them. But again, we struggle to have society understand. And I would like to bring this back to a question to you, but I first want to highlight one thing, and then I'll throw the question at you. As I said, we give out your book on combat with reintegration. Now, I reached out to our library in our training center, and I had them get some of your books, and they actually, at one point, took them out of circulation. And it's because of some of this anti-police narrative. It's like the thin blue line patch. It's like the sheepdog metaphor. It's where people in society, whether sometimes it's high-ranking people within policing, but sometimes it's just those outside that have an anti-police bias, in my opinion, can disparage policing.
Yeah.
But I would ask you, not what would you say to the side of the people who hate the cops no matter what,
Right.
but to those maybe in law enforcement management or the civilians who they don't really know what they don't know.
Yeah.
What would you maybe share with them to help educate them, to help them understand where cops are coming from?
Here's kind of a couple of dynamics right up front. You really talked about love. And people have trouble working their mind around it. We talk about empathy. Empathy is love in action. Empathy is love with its shoes on. What if it was my family trapped in that burning building? What if it was my spouse that was being murdered? And you can't help but think, what if it was me that cop was responding to? Empathy is love with its shoes on. And in my book on killing, I introduced the concept of killology. And criminology is not about teaching people to be criminals. Killology is not about teaching people to kill. It's about understanding the factors that enable and restrain killing in our society. So people point some terrible crime in the news. Oh, that proves that mankind's a killer. Well, that's 1 in a million. The U.S. is a nation of 1/3 of a billion people. That one terrible crime you heard about today is 1 in 1/3 of a billion. I tell people, explain to me the 99.999999% of our citizens who didn't kill anybody today. Divorce, infidelity, layoff, traffic accidents. In a lifetime of provocation, less than 1 in 1,000 people will even seriously attempt to take a life. Explain that. So there's this whole array of physiological, psychological, social factors that enable and restrain killing. We know how to turn them off. We know how to turn them on. And so that empathy of this fellow human being to be able to truly take out a life and not feel any remorse, you got to be a sociopath. You have a total absence of empathy. That we need to be at peace with what we did. We need to feel good that we stopped, we stopped the threat and we saved a life. So we have something called survivor euphoria. And people feel bad, they don't feel bad. People feel bad, they feel good about it. Well, what do you want? You want one-shot cops, one-shot soldiers, you one time throw them away? But at some level, there's this empathy that says that person's just like me and I just snuffed their life out. And so the most important factor in so many ways, understand this, interpersonal human aggression, violent crime, is the most psychologically toxic, corrosive thing any human being will ever face. The DSM, the Bible of psychiatric psychology, talk about PTSD. Whenever the cause of your trauma is human in nature, the degree of trauma usually more severe and long lasting. So I tell people, you tell me difference between these two scenarios. Scenario one, tornado hits your house while you're gone, put your family in the hospital. How do you feel about them? Well, thank God they're alive. Scenario two, criminals break in the house while you're gone, beat your family in the hospital stay. Now you feel any different? It's all the difference in the world. One is a random act of nature, the other an intentional malignant act by a human being. On 9/11, terrorists murdered 3,000 of our citizens. Way of life changed forever. NATO went to war. We invaded two nations. And that same year, 10 times as many people died in traffic accidents. Didn't change nothing. They were accidents. To understand that interpersonal human aggression is the single most psychologically toxic, corrosive thing anybody will ever face. Don't cop a pity party out there. But you think the firefighter prepares for the fire, the diver prepares for the sea, the pilot prepares for the sky. How much more so must we prepare for that toxic realm of interpersonal human aggression? And that's the dynamic, the metaphor of the sheepdog, the protector, the individual who's capable of violence, but also empathy. Violence without empathy is a pretty good thumbnail definition of sociopath, a psychopath. But the potential for violence combined with empathy, with love, that's the sheepdog, that's the cub. They're out there to save lives. They're out there to help people. They're out there to put their life on the line, to face universal human phobia. I call it the universal human phobia, interpersonal human aggression. And that's their job. And they go through it every day. And there's another angle to understand, is it's much, much worse than it looks. We measure the problem every year with the murder rate. The murder rate is being held down by medical technology. You get it. Tourniquets alone have cut the murder rate in half in just the last decade. Count up however many dead people in Canada, how many dead people in America, double it. And that's probably at least how many would be dead without tourniquets. Somebody slaps on a tourniquet, saves a crime victim's life, we've prevented a murder. In America, if just 20 to 30 people a day slap on a tourniquet, save a crime victim's life, we cut the murder rate in half. I train our nation's largest fire EMS service. They say, Dave, I guarantee in our city alone, 20 to 30 times a day, we slap on a tourniquet, save a crime victim's life. So 911 system, shock, all the things that save people's lives are reducing the murder rate. The number of dead people is a lie. Every year we lie to ourselves. Imagine if somebody said, your grandpa made 25 cents an hour. This job makes $25 an hour. You're 100 times better off than your grandpa. We all see the lie. We all know about inflation. You can't compare money. We say, oh yeah, the murder rate exploded, but still not quite as bad as the 1960s. That's your BS meter going off. It's much, much worse than it looks. And we need to know that. We need to present that at the highest level. We are a wealthy society. North America, when things are wrong, we throw money at it. That's how we won, World War II. We threw money at it. How we win the Cold War. We outspent the Russians. What we do during the pandemic, we threw trillions at. When people understand how bad it is, they'll start throwing money at this problem. When they understand just how horrendously homicides have exploded, and then when they put that in perspective for medical technology, it will absolutely transform the way we see the situation and lead us as a civilization to start throwing money at this problem. The police are just like medical professions. Docs don't decide to take a life. A lot of lives are lost because docs make mistakes, and many, many lives are saved because docs are there. In a rational world, the person who decides whether or not to shoot your kid should be the best paid, best trained, best qualified person on the planet. Now, recruiting is down, retention is down, and the great danger is to lower the standards. And we must not do that. Look, obesity, we all put on weight. We can cut some slack there. Asthma, the military won't take you, we'll take you. Tattoos, times change. Beards, grooming standards change. The one thing we cannot, must not lower the standards on is moral and ethical standards. Pre 9/11, post Rodney King, the situation is so bad in America that they were waiving felonies to get people cops, waiving felonies. Oh, well, we're shorthanded, and it's a nonviolent felony. We'll take this guy in. Well, I talked LAPD, Rampart scandal, executive summary, page 1, number 1. We probably shouldn't have hired a cop with a felony record. Bam. So a lot of people have probably seen the video of the Memphis cops beating that kid to death.
Tragic.
And they're laughing as he died. Now, if that had been a bunch of white cops,
Tragic.
it would have been, but no matter who did it. Now, this was a selection failure. Those were people in the job who should never be wearing a uniform. It was a selection failure. It was a training failure. It was a leadership failure. And the one thing is that the public says, well, let this guy in because he represents a minority. No, we don't need him. He doesn't meet the standards. Well, this guy needs to come in. No, he doesn't meet the standards. And we've got to hold the highest ethical, moral standards. And a friend of mine, Sheriff Ozzie in Spokane, Washington, wrote a book called every sheriff in the state of Washington signed on a law that said if you're fired for ethical and moral standards, you can't get rehired down the road. It never got out of committee. The unions killed it. The name of the book was Are We Who We Say We Are? And so that idea of lowering the standards, but no cops there, bad things happens all the time. Bad cops there, does something stupid, caught on camera, very, very bad things will happen. Do not lower the standards from the moral and ethical aspects. And better no cop than a bad cop, and better no cop than a tired cop. Better no cop than a sleep-deprived cop. They'll be caught on film and bad things are going to happen, and we cannot allow that to continue. So if we educate people and we start throwing money at this problem, we will turn this tide.
Yeah, I love what you said. I'm going to add one more element to the thing you mentioned about Memphis. And not that I'm there to know specifically, but I suspect that the other issue would be culture. And I can say I know of times, or you hear of times where there's like a let's get them kind of mindset, like a street justice, vigilantism.
Yeah.
And I think police culture is really an amalgamation of subcultures.
Yeah.
And we have to look at the history of the culture. And I've had some old timers where they'd say to me, like, back in the day, if you beat your wife, you were getting beat up. Back in the day, if you ran from the cops, you were getting beat up. And I think what we're seeing there is likely a normalization of that within the subculture.
Yep.
And again, I don't know how pervasive, and I don't know this definitively. I'm only inferring based on what I saw. But to, be picking someone up and re-hitting them kind of thing, like that.
We have to confront it at every level.
Yeah.
Don't let people say things like that. Confront it. No, that's not right. That kind of mindset will get you in big trouble. That kind of mindset will cause us all great harm. We need to confront it. The rules have changed. The times have changed. The rules are always changing, and we got to win the game by the rules. You don't want to play by the rules? Then get to hell out of our game. It's too much at stake to lose it all because of one idiot.
But,
we got to win by the rules.
And I would just say, like, we can't afford the mistakes, because like you basically said, hey, if we're bringing in the wrong people and they're, like, say we have, close to 1 million cops in North America, and one big incident it destroys so much trust. Yes. And that's what I'm hearing from you is like, we need to make sure that we're vetting, bringing people of the right character, that, if you have asthma or whatever, like, that's cool. We'll take you, we'll help you, we'll work with you. And it's on us to educate. And I would argue it's on us to shape the culture. And I think I would love to add, like, I feel like you did that for me 10 years ago or more, as I found your books, and that you've been doing it for our culture for quite a long time. But my challenge to everyone listening to this is, how can you shape your subculture? What are some of the lessons that you can take out of today to do something about the sleep your shift patterns, how you sleep. Can you recognize, like I did to that friend of mine who showed up to work, and you know him well enough to see the change, and you say, "Hey man, I'm worried about you." Oh yeah, and to say, "Oh yeah, you know they've been through some trauma lately at work," and it's how do you make your little subculture better, right? That's policing isn't one big culture. It's not monolithic. It's a bunch of amalgamation of subcultures. You can't do everything about all of them, but you get some control. You that's listening over your subculture, over your family, over your department, over your patrol watch or whatever you're on. What can you do to make it better? And I think what I would love to do is go back to you, Dave, and ask you, like, what would be kind of, your one main takeaway for a listener that you'd want them to get out of this talk, that you'd love to see them change within their culture?
Well, I think we got to let people know how bad it really is. The murder rate completely misrepresents this. We all get that. Nobody can deny it. Boom, we get it. Medical technology saving ever more lives. The murder rate's a lie. It's much, much worse than it looks. And when people begin to understand just how bad it really is, they'll start throwing money at this problem. This is the single greatest threat to the existence of our civilization. Or this is the breakdown of our civilization. This is violent crime at levels never seen before. This is worthy of all of our time and all of our energy and all of our efforts. I'll give you a little gleam of good news. One place where we're winning the battle for the hearts and minds is our cops in the school. In America, with 3 exceptions, there has never been a multiple homicide in a school with an armed cop present in the building. And the 3 exceptions, every single time, the minute the cop got there, not another kid died. And the kids are learning to love that cop. And what we got to do is put good cops in those schools. And we've got to recognize that we're winning their hearts and minds in the schools. There's a anti-cop propaganda in the movies and television, in the news. The place we can win that is being there for them in those schools, protecting those kids. It is our highest priority to protect our most precious citizens, to protect our way of life. We're not just fighting for our kids' life, we're fighting for our way of life. And while we're there, and the cop haters hate cops in the school. They talk about a school to prison pipeline. It's not true. Schools that have an SRO in them are less likely to send kids to prison because they intercede earlier levels. The data is overwhelming. I'll point you to the research on that. But the idea that the cop in the school is a bad thing, the cop haters hate that. But we're winning their hearts and minds by protecting our most precious resource, by putting cops in the schools dedicated to winning their hearts and minds and protecting them. And there really is hope for the future based on that, the terrible tragedy of school massacres. And something positive comes out of that. We're putting cops in the schools and they're winning their hearts and minds.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a crucial point, and thank you for raising that. So I think we've had a comment come in, and I'd just love to ask Neil, our tech guy, if you could post it up for me. Question: some groups are opposed to critical incident stress debriefing. I'm glad you're setting the record straight. I just want to highlight the value because I can say, like, I've been on a team where we've had shootings, and some of the officers have described how hard it was for them to not be able to connect with their peers. And you've referenced some good books today. And I want to throw one more out there for people, which is Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score. If anybody out there suffering from trauma, like I've obviously referenced nightmares in relation to my experience, that's a great book that can help you as I saw a lot of my own trauma in that and a lot of the science that really normalized it and I think helped me in my healing process. But I think my one big takeaway from that book is connection is your number one protective factor from trauma. So I just want to highlight how important that is.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, David?
Yeah,
In regards to the comment
like I said, I'm starting to work with Israel, and we don't understand that the mental health community are on these little silos, and they're all fighting against each other. The Freudian approach and this approach and that approach, and what the mental health professional, well, you're re-traumatizing the individual, and that's not true. So here we are in 22 years of war. We're still in Iraq and other places around the planet. Here we are in the most violent times in history. And the one thing we have learned irrefutably in the military and irrefutably in law enforcement is we must do the debriefing. Now, it's part of the healing. Have that bottle of water there. Anybody becomes emotional, take that swig of water, separate the memory from the emotion. But understand that debriefing is when we fill in the memory gaps, so sort out the memory distortions. You may be just fine. I don't need no stinking debriefing, but you've got that bit of information that can literally save your friend's life. We hold lives in our hands in the event, and we hold lives in our hands after the event. We participate in that debriefing. We have that bottle of water in front of us. And no, it is not re-traumatizing. But here's this psychotherapist guy that, well, I'm the only one that's qualified to do this on a one-on-one basis over a period of years. And these are the kind of people that stand up and saying, we can't do this. They don't even know what they're talking about. They don't understand how the debriefing works and the good that's being done. It's been won across America. There's without any doubt, the people attacking the debriefing, they've lost, they're done. It's a dead issue. Here we are in Israel, we're still seeing them saying, oh, we can only do it one-on-one. But one thing is to do the debriefing in small groups. The military pulls a whole company together. Say, anybody have any problems? Oh, okay, off they go. Now, we got to do it squad size. In the U.S. Army, it's the critical incident debriefing. We call it AAR, after action review. And the AAR in training and in combat is done by us, a young sergeant. At the squad level, the sergeants are trained to conduct an AAR. And the only ingredient that I'd add to that military after action review is everybody has water in front of them. They begin re-experience the event. We take that swig of water, separate the memories from the emotions. But I'm glad you asked about that, because that's that movement towards health. And just as medical technology is saving lives, psychological technology is saving lives. You're one of them. 20 years prior to this, you probably would not have been able to pull out of that spiral. You've got the information now. Now, not only are we saving lives physically, but we're saving lives emotionally. And that's the same thing. It's a life in peril and a life that we've saved. And there are many, many of those out there that have been saved because this information is getting out there. Stay in the fight. Believe in what you're doing, brother. I'm 68 years old. I want to do this for another 20 years. But young guys like you picking up the ball and running with it just refreshes my heart. And let me just tie in something right there. 68 years old, on the road a couple hundred days a year, believe in what I'm doing. And but why do we do what we do? Why do we stay in the fight in these bad times? And all I can do is tell you why I stay in the fight. My bride of 49 years, my high school sweetheart, I've been on the road. I retired from the Army 26 years ago. I get home 1, 2, 3 nights a week, conjugal visit, clean underwear, back on the road. There's the only one more precious than my bride are my children, my grandchildren. I got a grandson in the Army now, and Blake and I will be great-grandparents. And we believe if we love our children, we love our grandchildren, if we love our God, if we love our nation, we give 100%. That's what love means. Love means the worse it gets, harder you fight. Now, you got a sick baby. What do? Abandon the family? Oh, I didn't sign for that. I'm like, oh, you got a sick baby. Maybe you or the spouse and quit the job, stay with them full time. We do some fundraising. You don't abandon what you love in their hour of greatest need. The worse it gets, harder we fight. That's what love means. And that's why empathy is love with its shoes on. And cops are driven by this empathy, this desire to help others. And they very much do not want to hurt people at a physiological level. And when they do, we want them to be okay. We want them to deal with it in a comfortable manner. But I just got to reemphasize this dynamic of love. And we do what we do because we love our God, we love our nation, we love our family, and we want to make the world a better place. And the opposite of evil is love. Evil is absence of love, just as darkness is absence of light. So there's one other issue that's worth mentioning here. A first responder's job is to go to the worst things that happen every day. If you made a list of the most terrible things happening every day, that's their job, to go to that. And you can't help but ask, it's not about religion, it's an existential question. And everybody asks, how could a loving God allow these terrible things to happen? And it's really an important question. And the answer is pretty simple. What all of the faiths, in my book on spiritual combat talks about what all the faiths will tell you, we are not God's puppets. A loving God is not a helicopter parent that hangs over you every minute of every day. Sooner or later, you're going to die, But you ever heard, if you love something, let it go. If it comes back, it's true to you. That's how much God loves us enough to let us make our own decisions. And that means a lot of people make really bad decisions. And you say, God, why don't you do something? He says, I did. I sent you for such a time as this. So I think it's valuable to confront that dynamic. And God lets us make our own decisions. A lot of people make bad decisions. And to be able to be at peace with the possibility there's a higher power and that he sent you for this mission to love and to protect people in love. Empathy is love with the shoes on.
Yeah, very wise words. You have a lot of wisdom, and I love getting to draw some of that out. So thank you. I love what you said about the I sent you, and I think to me that says it's action required. It's not hey, you tick a box like,
Yeah.
and that's your own wellness, but that's to do good, without, like for evil to try and fall, it takes us for good people to do nothing, right?
It's a good phrase. How can we help other people if we can't help ourselves? I ask that how can we help other people if we can't help ourselves? We've got to create an environment which is okay to get help. It's a
Yeah,
balancing act between the pity party and the macho man.
yeah.
Don't go into combat think it'll destroy you, because it'll probably make you stronger. But if there is a problem, deal with it. Have faith to help can help.
I love adding that onto the it's okay not to be okay, and it's okay to do something about it.
Yes.
Because like this is the way I saw my experience. I don't get all the control, but I get some. And when I prioritize my sleep and when I quit drinking and when I get out in nature, every time I'm just turning a dial a little towards health. You do that over time and you start doing that more and more, you start to get a lot healthy. And honestly, it's like a stress on your body. When
Yes.
you undergo a great stress, you can grow great strength.
Yes.
And I think many of our great leaders throughout history have endured great suffering
Yes.
and they've gained great strength and wisdom from it.
Amen.
So those are fantastic points. I know we're going to have another comment coming up. I also just want to, as that's happening, I want to touch on one more thing. You mentioned the peer support aspect with for some of the military units. And I think the key part you said is it's a peer, right? And so I can say we've done some different peer support programs in my agency, and we've gone, one of the models is towards instead of having the psychologist come in and do debriefings, we have a peer-led version. And what I actually heard is from Dr. Stephanie Kahn, who's herself a retired cop and who's gone on to become a psychologist. And I've heard her say that people want to hear it from their peer. Like if you can have, and that's my goal is to stay in the job and to be able to be an advocate from within the profession.
It's a win-win. Do you
Yeah.
understand? The peer is getting something out of it at the same time.
Yeah.
There's great satisfaction. It's a win-win. Yes.
Yeah. And then so we got a comment coming up here. Neil, our IT guy, if you don't mind, give me a hand to pop that comment back up. Perfect. Many agencies are now refusing to do debriefings because they now believe it is going to cause trauma, not prevent it. Thank you. Yeah, I know there is some discussion around the vicarious trauma aspect, and I think we can still find a way to do the peer support and to have it be from a peer to educate the peers with enough knowledge, enough like psychoeducation that they can do a good job of it and to not re-traumatize people, right? I think we need to find that right balance to understand they don't maybe need a whole bunch of like gory trauma detail. And also that, even the Mitchell model is designed to be a homogenous group, right? So we're not bringing in 100 people that saw vastly different things. We're being smart about what we're doing, but we got to make sure that we're doing
Amen.
that.
Amen.
So I as I wrap up, I want to thank you, Dave. Like this is something I've looked forward to forever and just means the world to me. So thank you for how much you helped me, because you really did help me by investing your time into writing books. You have, I'm sure, helped a lot of people, and you're still continuing on with that purpose to go on and help more. And I want to thank you not only from our profession, but from our society. And I would love to turn it over to you for any kind of closing comments of where people can find you, what you're up to now, and just how they can connect with you to get more of this great wisdom that you have.
Well, my website is grossmanontruth.com, grossmanontruth.com. And we got a lot of good stuff there. I was mentioning ahead of time, my newest book, you've read On Killing, On Combat, On Hunting. You cannot understand who we are and what we do without understanding that. Also, new book on spiritual combat, on spiritual warfare. They're all on the website. But most of all, just stay safe, believe in who you are, believe in what you do. And in the end, if you're a person of faith, you can lean into that. That's why faith is one of the pillars of resiliency. In the end, everybody's going to die physically. In the end, every nation dies. In the end, our son will die, but eternity continues. If you're a person of faith, you can lean into that and don't let the things of this world pull you down and stay focused on the big prize. And you're not oriented that way, that's okay too. There's many other ways to go about resiliency. but believe in who you are, believe in what you do. You represent love. Empathy is love with its shoes on. And when I say, what if it was my child that had been abused? What if it was my spouse that had been murdered? That's love. That's empathy with shoes on. And that's what makes a great cop. Believe in who you are, believe in what you do. God bless you and thank you.
Well, I will conclude by saying thank you for your leadership. You've made a great difference in many lives. And yeah, I just really want you to know that. That's super meaningful. I also want everyone to know we'll put some notes or links in the show notes, both to your website, sir, and also to one for the First Responder Behavioral Health Institute. So with that, I would like to sign off as the guest host for the Enroute podcast. Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Grossman. Thank you to everyone for listening, and we'll hope to see you again soon. Take care.
I'm Joseph Brigandi. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Enroute. Enroute is a production of the First Responder Behavioral Health Institute. To learn more about us, head on over to frbhi.com.